Hello and welcome to this week's weekly business review brought to you by Business News Wales with me, Carwyn Jones. And joining me today are two people who are very prominent in the world of business. Heather Myers, who is the Chief Executive of the South and Mid Wales Chambers of Commerce, and Robert Lloyd Griffiths, who returns. And he, of course, is the Director of the Institute of Directors in Wales. Welcome, both.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Now, we are living in very difficult times, as we know, and the coronavirus still casts its shadow, not just over people's health, but of course the business world in Wales. A very fast-moving situation, of course, and who knows where we'll be next week. Heather, what's your take in terms of how businesses are dealing with the situation and whether they've experienced any difficulties in the area that you cover?
I think we are experiencing difficulties because we're in uncharted territory, really. My take on it from the business point of view is twofold, really. The first is that we have a duty of care to our employees as employers, and we need to be doing what we can to support them. And in terms of events that we're holding and sort of social distancing, I think we've responsibility there. And secondly, I think we as the business community have a duty of care to ourselves to ensure that we do what we can through contingency planning and business continuity to ensure that we mitigate the impact on the Welsh economy itself. So I think businesses that we're talking to, I'm suggesting that they look at contingency planning, they look at how they can do rollouts from home, how they can do Skype calls or video conferencing to make sure that not only do we do that social distancing for ourselves as individual, but that we try to protect the Welsh economy from the worst impact by acting responsibly through these next few weeks.
It's incredible, isn't it, that we use the phrase social distancing. Yeah. If I'd have said that even 4 weeks ago, no one would know what I was talking about. Yeah. I mean, Robert, from your end and the businesses that you've been working with, what are their concerns at the moment in terms of coronavirus?
I mean, there's a range of concerns. Heather is absolutely right. You know, this is uncharted territory, uncharted waters, and businesses I'm speaking to are naturally concerned. But what I've found out over the years that I've been in this role is that they're resilient. They just get on with getting on. They're taking advice. They're doing all they possibly can to prepare themselves for what may be coming down the line. But they are just getting on with it and making the best of it, putting plans in place, looking after their employees, and also making assessments as to how they're going to be impacted in terms of supply chains and how to get their goods to market as well. So it's really an opportunity to make a huge assessment as to where you are, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there, whilst being mindful of government advice on what to do next.
Are you finding, either of you, that there are problems in supply chains already, or there's particular demand for some items that as a result, is causing a scarcity? I was shopping last night, and if you want to get hand sanitizer, forget it, or toilet paper for that matter, or indeed chewing gum for some reason. There was a run on chewing gum and a run on bread mix for bread makers. Yeah. Why, I don't know. And a run on cucumbers, which I've never struck me as being particularly essential if you're going to survive something. But are businesses finding that they can't get their hands on supplies that they need?
Yeah, I think from the international trade perspective, businesses do tend to carry a certain amount of stock because, just in case of some supply chain issue. I think that's, in some cases, that stock is becoming less. And so we're looking then at the areas where they're getting imports from to see how they're recovering, and are those supplies then going to start coming back online from places like China, and when are they likely to come back online? But I think that what everybody seems to be doing is just being more sparing about what they're using, which is no bad thing. But I don't think we've felt the full impact of that yet. I think that will come as those stocks that were in place start to dwindle.
Robert, are there any particular sectors that are more vulnerable than others, do you think?
I think a sector which is particularly vulnerable is the tourist sector. I heard this morning that worldwide they're looking at we're looking at impacting on 50 million jobs. Tourist sector in Wales is a hugely important part of our economy, and it's the not knowing the length of time and the duration when people won't be visiting, won't be making trips. I think is a concern. So that's one sector I think which is we should look at in particular. other sectors. I think there's pockets across all sectors, and Heather's absolutely right. When things develop and move a bit further down the line, we'll be able to understand a little bit more as to the impacts and the accessibility of goods and services, and also elements for the supply chain. It's a little bit wait and see. And I think many businesses across the economy of Wales are waiting and seeing. Of course, 95% of our businesses in Wales are micro businesses employing 9 people and under. So we are particularly exposed to when big things hit us, because we've got such a range of small businesses here in the country.
I think retail will also be hit.
Yeah.
We're just looking around Cardiff this morning. There are less people walking around than I'd ordinarily expect to see. So I think retail will be hit, and of course that then has a knock-on effect across the foundational economy as well. So, I think it's wait and see. But as far as I'm concerned at the moment, it's business as usual until we know different. Yeah.
It's rather perverse, isn't it? You mentioned the hand sanitizer shortages. I saw on the news a couple of nights ago, there's a business in North Wales gone into absolute overdrive and taking on more staff. And obviously for obvious reasons. But, there are those businesses that will have opportunities, but it's not the opportunities we would wish, is it?
No.
And I think you mentioned earlier on how it's Friday the 13th as we sit here, aptly, and you mentioned how quiet it is today. I came up with the train this morning. The train was half size, 5 carriages, and I thought, here we go, I'll be hanging on to the edge of this train. And there were seats.
Yeah.
Problem, the roads are very quiet. Where's everyone gone? Are they working from home? But you're right. It's very, very quiet.
There's a lot of there's a lot of businesses that are. There are also businesses that I've been speaking with are doing a trial run today. So whether or not this is a range of businesses doing it, I'm not sure. Ourselves in the Institute of Directors, we're doing a trial run from working from home today, just to see how it all works, how our technology works, and we'll see what happens. And I think that could be it. I think maybe we might have arrived a little bit early today, perhaps, and maybe the traffic is pumped up a bit now. Who knows?
I think that trial run is really important, actually. I think a number of businesses that I've spoken to are looking at that, how are they going to work from home? How is that going to affect them? And certainly the other part of that is that what you don't want in a small business is all of your team going down at the same time. I mean, I know nationally, we're worried about the impact on the NHS. But in terms of small businesses, trying to phase whatever happens is really important for business continuity. So, keeping staff sometimes at a distance from each other is also an important part of our continuity processes. So I think that is playing a part today as well. And I think we'll see that through next week as well.
Well, obviously something that we'll be returning to several times sadly, over the course of the next few weeks and possibly months. And of course, we've seen the budget this week.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that the message from the budget was get it done or getting it done. That was what Rishi Sunak said over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Lots of money for capital projects, perhaps a little less for revenue funding. Robert, what's your take on the budget and what it means?
I think this is an unprecedented budget, and I think from what he had to say, I think businesses, certainly from the business I've been speaking to in the IOD, seemed relatively positive, and there was a sense that getting things done is what business wants to do. So, getting on with it. Some of the initiatives that he introduced in terms of business rates, I think was welcomed across the board, and we're looking forward to seeing how that's going to play out here in Wales. And, any help that can be offered to business at this time is obviously to be welcome, because, as we keep saying, these are uncertain times, and business thrives on certainty.
I think the business rates issue, I suppose, would be important as well, Heather, for the businesses you've been talking to.
Yes, indeed. And, we have a different system in Wales, and how that lands in Wales. I'm working across the chamber network through different devolved nations and across the chambers in England. It's quite interesting to see how the conversations are playing out in different parts of the country as well. I think there's some really there's a positive mood music in there, I think, for business. The commitment to spending on infrastructure, a commitment to the 55 million for the Mid Wales Growth Deal is encouraging, and the rollout of broadband, and particularly the successful projects in South Wales and Pembrokeshire to enable better broadband connectivity is to be celebrated as well. So, you know, business is always wanting it to go a bit further. There is some uncertainty around how things will work out for smaller businesses, but I think in general the message is a positive one, and shows a direction of travel, which I think as the business community we would applaud.
We had the announcement yesterday that, as today's Friday, Thursday, that the Welsh Government will ring fence any resource that comes from the UK Government.
That's encouraging.
For spending on non-domestic rates. Experience tells me that what's announced and what actually happens is not necessarily the same thing. And I almost guarantee that the package of money from Westminster won't be enough to cover the same package in England. But we hear this from the Welsh Government. I'm sure businesses have welcomed that. It does take a little time, of course, to work these things through in Wales, which possibly is frustrating for businesses when they see the announcement in England.
And you know, the devil's in the detail of understanding where that actually fits for people. You know, but yeah, it's encouraging to hear that will at some point drop into the business world at some point.
I should say, from our perspective, it's important at these times that governments appear to work together for the benefit of all. And I think that certainly from our members' perspective, you know, partnerships and more and greater collaboration is to be welcomed. So I'm sure that there'll be lots of conversations happening between the two governments, and that's right and proper.
Yeah. In terms of some of the other issues in the budget, nothing on air passenger duty, of course.
No.
Which was disappointing, I suppose, given where the airline industry is at the moment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything that could have injected a bit more oomph or positivity into that industry and that sector would have been hugely encouraged. It is disappointing that it wasn't.
And also missing was any guidance on what's going to be in the shared prosperity fund going forward as well. Bit of a gap around that as well, which of course we are looking at. Yeah, that has. You know, so we're still no clearer really about how that money is going to land in Wales and what it's going to focus on. So there are a few gaps, I think, that we're still waiting for clarity on.
I was interested in his speech that he mentioned that hydrogen. And mentioned that the first hydrogen fuel cell battery was produced here in Wales, or invented in Wales. Invented in Wales. I recently went to the Hydrogen Association launch. It was hugely impressive. Some really big businesses getting involved in it, and you know, we're always looking for the next big thing for Wales. I'm going to be watching that with an eagle eye.
Yeah.
Nothing specifically for Wales, of course. We had the announcement of money to promote Scottish food and drink. But nothing for Wales. I did chuckle when the Chancellor announced the Pant to Llanymynech bypass, and I was asked whether this was an encroachment on the Welsh Government's responsibilities. And I had to point out that it's entirely in England. Pant is in England, and it's but the Welsh name. And I'm sure people will welcome that, of course.
When he started talking about roads, I thought, oh my goodness me, here comes the M4. But it wasn't to be.
Well, they can't build it, you see. They don't have the powers to build it in Wales.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the issue. That's
another story.
That's another story.
We probably spent half an hour on that, to be honest.
Yeah. And I thought it was quite strange to say, to emphasise, rightly so, I thought, the need to deal with climate change and then announce the road building programme in such a way that he said, well, we want to put X number of miles of tarmac down. I thought, well, I'm sure I'd have phrased it that way. I'd try to make it a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think
climate change friendly.
That in itself is an issue. Is, you know, how do you decarbonise the construction industry and decarbonise those infrastructure projects, and that thereby hangs the challenge. Which doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't go ahead with projects, but we need to look at ways of trying to reduce the impact of those projects. Yeah. So one of the things that I thought was interesting was also that. The so-called tampon tax, there's no VAT going on, the VAT has been removed from that. And in terms of one of the messages that does send out is I think it's the first time that the UK government has stepped away from EU policy and EU regulation to remove the VAT. So I think obviously it's a gender issue, but in terms of the message that sends out, there's a wider message there as well. So I was very pleased to see that in the budget yesterday as well.
Well, we'll have more information, I'm sure, over the course of the next week for us to chew over. But let's move on now to the stories chosen by our guests. Heather has chosen a story that's appeared in Business News Wales, and it's about a programme to empower the next generation of Welsh female leaders that Coleg Cymoedd have set up, and it looks to empower the next generation of young women to fulfil their education and career potential. This caught your eye, Heather?
Well, it did, because on the back of International Women's Day last Sunday, and there's been a range of events across Wales this week and indeed last week to look at the barriers that we still face as a result of gender in the workforce. And I was lucky enough to listen to Alison Rose, the CEO of NatWest. She came to the University of South Wales last Friday and talked about local, relatable role models. And then I saw this story about the mentoring system they've got in Coleg Cymoedd, and the fact that they've got women from different parts of business society, from law, marketing, medicine, all mentoring and supporting women into business. And I think everybody should have a mentor. But particularly, I think sometimes women suffer from perhaps less confidence and understanding that so many all routes are open to women. There is no route that is closed to women these days, but having women who've walked that path and then putting back into that younger generation to increase their horizons and increase their ideas about what they can achieve is really important. But also it's really important to know they can do it here in Wales. So this is why the story caught my eye. It's a great story. They are to be commended for what they're doing, but there's such a wide array of really influential, down-to-earth, getting on with a job business leaders that are women in Wales, and I salute all of them. And this story just helped identify one of those key issues.
And the programme itself is a programme where the learners have monthly one-on-one meetings with those mentors. They discuss their aspirations, discuss career development, and they form a plan to achieve what they want to achieve. And of course, we talk about this often, don't we? The power of example is so important, to say to young people, you can do it because this person, your mentor, was once like you, and they have done it.
Yeah, and they're relatable. Yeah. I mean, we can all see, female leaders in world global organisations, but actually these are just women who have trodden a certain path, who are local, who understand some of the issues that everybody faces, not just women in the workplace, but can potentially mentor in a way that's encouraging as a role model to bring other women on. And I think that's a really valuable thing to be doing. And I know that it's not just Coleg Cymoedd doing this, that it's going on around. Business Wales are doing it, and the University of South Wales are doing it. There's a whole range of mentoring programmes, but this just caught my eye because it's this week, and it's a great story.
And it's hugely important that we celebrate role models. I think just near where we're talking today, the first statue in Cardiff of a woman will be erected quite soon, the Betty Campbell, someone who did such amazing work. And in Newport, there is a campaign as well to honour with a statue Lady Rhondda, Margaret Mackworth, who was the first president of the Institute of Directors. So a real role model, a leader in business, and I come into contact day in, day out with amazing female role models who are doing some fantastic work. So it's a great story.
We still have a problem in Wales in terms of women occupying senior positions, particularly, I would argue. I mean, it's still very, very male. If you go to some of the business gatherings, it's it's not 50, it's hardly 50-50, let alone a proper representation of women. We know we're not there in terms of where we need to be, but are we going in the right direction, Heather?
Well, I think so. If I think about my career that spanned 30 years, and for a number of years I was possibly the only woman in many of the meetings that I went to. And I'm fortunate enough to go to a number of business meetings these days where I'm very, very rarely the only woman in the room these days. It may not be 50-50, but it's definitely it's definitely moved. But also when I was thinking about the networks that I have and the influential women that are around in Wales, I think that there's a groundswell, there's momentum there, and that actually we are moving in the right direction. It's funny, when I talk to my children who are in their 20s, they don't see gender at all. They don't see it the way that I saw it when I first entered the workplace. So I think in terms of not just accessibility to positions, which I think is there, coming slowly, not fast enough, but it's getting there. But in terms of mindset and perception of the younger generation, I think it's important to reflect on what they feel as well, in terms of entering the workplace and knowing that actually no job should be closed to anybody.
Well, I qualified as a barrister in 1989, and we all had to go around looking for pupillage, as it was called, traineeship in chambers. And a lot of the women at that time would be asked the question, well, do you plan to marry and have children? Yeah. Imagine that now.
Yeah.
But that was a normal question then.
Yeah, and I attended a meeting where I was a senior person in the room, and the chap came in and said, I want to speak to somebody who's qualified. And I said, well, I am qualified. And, well, I'd like to speak to somebody who knows about this particular project. And I said, well, I am the person that's leading this project. And they said, well, actually, I just want to speak to a man. So,
Did he call you my love at any time, perhaps, just to make it even more patronising?
He might have called me darling or love or something. I don't know. I don't think he did. But, I got a male colleague out and said, look, you can try and answer the questions, but actually I'm the only one that can answer these. So when he refers to you, just say, ask Heather. And eventually he begrudgingly decided to speak to me and got the answers he needed.
Less of that.
And hopefully converted.
Yes, hopefully.
We want less of that.
Robert, your story, you've chosen a story from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and it's to do with continuing demand for UK housing. What caught your eye about this story?
Well, it caught my eye because I was looking for a good story and a good news story. Sales of new homes in Wales increased in February, according to the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, in their market survey, residential market survey. And this is the fourth month of growth in a row, and they're forecasting outlook in the next 3 months with an increase month on month. Now, obviously, this is dependent on where we are at the moment in relation to coronavirus, but the property is always a strong indicator of what's happening in the economy. My first job was selling advertising space in the property section of the Western Mail and Echo years and years ago. Well, not years and years ago, quite recently, obviously. And property and situations vacant, as we call them, the jobs advertising, was an indicator of how the economy was doing. But if we see a continuation of growth down the line, that's going to be good. Obviously, coronavirus notwithstanding, but it will be good news. And in terms of rising demand, puts upward pressures on prices, so house prices increase. Now, you can say, how is this going to play out over the next couple of months, particularly in the spring when people are looking for new homes? Will they be out and about looking for new homes? Who knows? Who can tell? But in general terms, an upsurge in the property market is a good thing.
Why is it a good thing?
Because if people are buying new homes, they're going to furnish them. If they furnish them, they're going to visit retail outlets. If they visit retail outlets, they're going to improve opportunities for those stores. They're going to decorate. They might put a new bathroom in. They might want to improve their televisions or their videos or their sound systems. So I think it's an indication of a greater opportunity. You buy a new house, you do it up.
The reason the reason why I ask is, if I was in my 20s, I'd probably say it's a bad thing because I can't get on the ladder. And one of the things that strikes me is it's far harder now.
Yeah, of course it is.
Going to buy a mortgage off the shelf when I bought my first house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where's the drive coming from? Because clearly there's an increase in demand because the prices are going up.
Yeah.
Given that we know it's probably more difficult than ever for younger people to get on the housing ladder, what's driving it if people can't get on the ladder at the very bottom? Is there some other driver here? We know in London, for example, there are a lot of drivers, people from abroad buying houses who've got lots of money, and they drive the market there.
Yeah.
But what's driving it elsewhere, do you think?
Well, I think the whole issue of millennials and Generation Z and what they're doing and how they're living is we could speak for a long time about that. I think the reduction in interest rates will or may help the situation. But what's driving it? I think we've got to look at the market in a whole, or as a whole. Not in a whole, hopefully, but as a whole, in relation to, it's a broad market, it's a spectrum of buyers. Of course, there will be those who are younger who may have aspirations to do things differently, whether it's to rent or even stay at home or whatever. But if we look at the market as a whole, to see an increase in elements of it, in parts of it, I think is important. I don't know. Yeah. The answer is, it's going to be much more difficult for people to start getting on the ladder. But there's those that will find a way.
And I think there's a recognition that we need affordable homes. There was obviously a statement in the budget yesterday, but that drive towards affordable homes is important. And I think that confidence in the property market demonstrates a slight confidence in the consumer market. So it's a litmus test. But also property is one of those few assets where over time you can potentially earn two types of income from it. So you can potentially earn an upward lift in the value of the property And if you rent it, you can get rental income from it. So I think it's just, and I think we've been through such a prolonged period of uncertainty that a period of settling down might be what people are looking for. And if there's more accessibility to affordable homes, that's going to enable entry level to the housing market. Lower interest rates does improve the cost of borrowing, so that's something that potentially people are looking at. From my point of view, one of the issues we need to look at that sits behind this is the ability to build new homes. The land that's coming forward. We've seen in the budget announcement yesterday that there's going to be an overhaul of the town planning system in England. Planning for the future, we don't know what that's going to look like, but it's likely to be a greater relaxation on certain land, say employment land for housing, which has its own benefits and opportunities and also difficulties. But in Wales, the planning system is quite different. So I think that one of the things that's starting to come to the fore from bigger developers is Wales still the place to build? If it's easier to build in England, and we've got land availability that's easier to get hold of in England, then how are we as Wales going to respond to that? Especially because we're passionate about creating a more inclusive society, and we need to create the land that will enable us to do that. So this is a great story on one level, but sitting behind that is a very complex planning system and land use system that needs overhauling, both in England and I think particularly now we might need to go back to this in Wales and look at how we're positioned, especially as internal markets become more prevalent, as we're looking across the UK as to how people move with different borders over in Europe. So I think there's an issue here around looking around the planning system, and I can say that as not currently practicing, but as by trade town planner. So I think there's
And what was curious is that we've talked about the difficulties of young people to get mortgages, even though they can afford them because they've never been cheaper. But I've got a lot of land in Wales that could potentially provide housing, could be used for housing, is in a floodplain.
Yeah, and obviously
the issue,
TAM 15 is something that they've withdrawn. Natural Resources Wales are looking at all of that, and that land availability.
I introduced that. What do you mean it's withdrawn? I was told it was over the top.
Sorry,
it's
not withdrawn. It's being reviewed. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I know there's a refocus of it.
I remember
and
at the time people thought
it
was too extreme, and now they're saying it was not strong enough. And that's climate change for you.
That's climate change.
Yeah, and I know that the planning regulations around flooding are very strict. And so they should be. And that's why it needs to be reviewed and revised in light of what we've had, as I understand, is like a 1 in 200 year flood that we've just experienced. But the legislation is looking at sort of 1 in 1,000 year flood, so that and climate change as well. But there are building techniques that can work around floodplains, and I think these are the sorts of things that we just have to be intelligent and a bit more resourceful to look at what could work. We don't have we have a lot of hilly land as well as a lot of flat land in Wales, so different building techniques are required, but I think it does need a relook at.
We also spoke last week, didn't we, about the self-build fund that the Development Bank has introduced as well, another great initiative. When we talked about the last time, but these different ways of doing things, as you say, Heather, are to be looked at and welcomed.
I live in Bridgend, and 60 years ago Bridgend flooded out. It's got a flood barrier in place which was there from the mid-80s, and it's designed to funnel water through the town and onto the playing fields to the south of the town, and it was a perfect example of how the system was meant to work. I mean, all the playing fields were underwater, but nobody got flooded, and all the houses.
Funny enough, Robina, where I live, is exactly the same. Goes on to Caerdydd Park. There you are.
Well, that's where it's meant to go. So, let's move on to our final story, which is about the city where I was born. Now, if my father's listening to this, I was born in Swansea. I know it's Morriston. I know you don't like the fact I was born in Swansea, but it is nevertheless Swansea. Real, I'm a Valley boy. But I worked in Swansea for 10 years, and it's fair to say that in the 90s, not a huge amount happened in Swansea. It had been reshaped by the Luftwaffe and built in a hurry after the war, and it was it was always lagging behind a little bit. But now we see some incredible things that have happened with the Meridian Tower, the National Waterfront Museum, and plans now for £1 billion of new investment in the city, not just around the seafront, but throughout the entire city going up to the north. So we have the new Penderyn Distillery and the Harvard Copper Works. We have the new indoor arena that's going near to the current Civic Centre site. And it seems to me that it was always important that development went west of Cardiff or even west of Bridgend. And we're now seeing Swansea going through a phase of development that certainly I've never seen before, and something that's potentially very exciting.
Absolutely.
Heather,
Yeah, it is. I was in Swansea earlier on this week. I was at Swansea University, and that campus itself is just is a demonstration of the sort of confidence that I think an investment that's going into Swansea. The city deal and the projects that are going on around that, the movement that we're now seeing. It's a really exciting time, but also it's not just Swansea, it's the whole region. And I think we sometimes focus on the city because that's the hub, but actually I was down at the port of Milford Haven waterfront, and just looking at what they're doing there on the back of confidence and investment that's in the region. And I think that in terms of the way that's all coming together, we're going to see a very different Swansea in 10 years' time, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Undoubtedly, Swansea's changed, and it continues to change. Whenever I visit, and I've got lots of members and friends in Swansea, it's a vibrant city. There's a lot happening. I think you're absolutely right, Heather. The university is incredible, and the opportunities for business down there seem to be increasing and improving all the time. The Meridian Tower that you mentioned, is it the tallest building in Wales?
It is the tallest building in Wales.
We had an event there a few years ago with the then Archbishop of Wales, and we held it there, I think, because he was near to his boss. So I think it's a great opportunity for business to locate and to generate opportunities there. And I love going to Swansea. It's got a buzz.
You're saying Swansea's closer to God than Cardiff.
Well, he was at his office at the time. Yeah, only then.
No, Swansea suffered a lot. Obviously, we know that after the war, and the fact that its transport system was very fragmented with 4 stations at one time. Yeah, and of course, we know the issues in terms of trying to bring trams and trains into Swansea, far more complicated than in Cardiff. And you mentioned Heather further west at Milford, very exciting with not just the 2 LNG terminals there, but the ferry,
and the hotel
waterfront,
development, the whole leisure thing.
Yeah, I mean the big challenge for Milford is that it's Wales' biggest fishing port. It's ensuring it still has the ability to access its market, which is 90% of the continent.
Yes.
And that's clearly something that will prey on the mind of people there. But Milford is an underused resource in many ways, and it's not many people know about what it has to offer. What with Valero, with the power station, and obviously with LNG, and of course the leisure uses as well.
Yeah, and I think that it's such an important hub for the hospitality sector and for the tourism sector, which we know is a really important part of the economy down in West Wales. And I love going down to West Wales because I almost feel like I'm on holiday when I'm doing business. It's a fantastic place. I was asking businesses, what would be a difference to you, and actually. You mentioned the railway system, and obviously the sort of contentious. Do we put a parkway station so that trains do not have to go in and out Swansea? And there's pros and cons to that. But actually, one of the things that I was told would make one of the biggest differences is just actually creating an hourly service to Cardiff, or a more regular service to Cardiff, so that they can actually access the hubs that are in Cardiff easier. So it's not just about the actual infrastructure itself, it's about the regulation and the flow of that, of how we use that as well, which I think is important.
It's the connectivity issue, which is hugely important. And we met recently with the leader of the council, Rob Stewart, and he's a passionate advocate for everything that's going on there. And I think that I think the lagoon, the whole tidal lagoon issue, really catapulted Swansea as well. It put us on the stage in an even greater way. I think we can talk about that another time, but the opportunities there for tourism and for business and for a range of positive aspects of it was really important. And I think that as you say, Carwyn, it's got a city with a buzz.
Yeah, I mentioned my father. My father was obviously being from Kamal and shares that. It's the old Jacks and Turks argument, isn't it? The rivalry between the two towns. The name Jack comes from a dog.
Yes.
Called Swansea Jack.
Swansea Jack.
He used to dive into the docks and rescue people. That's the story. Yeah. And there was a pub called Swansea Jack there at one time. Yeah. And then they called people slightly Turks. They don't call themselves Turks. And they say that's because the men in the tinplate works were going to work, and it was so hot there, they used to wrap towels around their heads to stop the sweat from dripping down. They looked like Ottoman Turks. That's the most plausible explanation I've had. But people in Swansea call themselves Jacks, but people in Sletty don't call themselves Turks. It's subtleties of 2 settlements that are 10 miles apart.
I love it. Yeah.
We haven't mentioned the football stadium either, which I think has again put Swansea over the recent years onto the UK stage, which has been hugely important. And people have seen Swansea in such a good light, and many people have visited as a result.
Well, St Helens was a great place to watch rugby when it wasn't raining.
Yeah.
When it was awful. So
absolutely.
the Liberty's been a real boost to the city, and of course the Premier League football. Of course, hopefully, at some point near future that'll come back.
Let's hope so.
And putting cultural events into Swansea as well. I think that's really important that we recognise that too.
Well, we've gone through a lot of news there. We've chewed the cud on many issues. Could I thank my two guests, Heather and Robert, for joining me today. You've been listening to the weekly business review from Business News Wales. Have a good week.